Hello, everybody, and welcome to English at Ease, where we learn a variety of different topics, all in a slow, clear, and simple way so that you can listen and learn English at your own unique learning level. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the story of Santa Claus. Christmas is almost here, only a few days away now, and I personally am getting very excited for Christmas. I'm very happy that Christmas is almost here. So I have decided to make this video to teach you a little bit more about Santa Claus and about the history behind this famous character. Now, probably most of us know who Santa Claus is. We've seen the images of Santa Claus. We've seen how he looks, and we know probably a little bit about what he represents for Christmas, about what he does during Christmas, about how he goes into people's houses and gives them gifts, how he gives children gifts for Christmas. What a lot of people don't know, what they don't know, is that Santa Claus actually has a much bigger history. Santa Claus was actually a real character. He was a real person from history. So today we are going to be talking about this historical character, and we are going to be talking about how this character slowly became Santa Claus, how we came to have the famous Santa Claus that we have today. How did his identity develop? So to begin, we have to talk about who Santa Claus was, who the real person was. Well, the real Santa Claus was actually not named Santa Claus. The name Santa Claus was not what he was called. The real Santa Claus was named Saint Nicholas. His name was Nicholas. His name was not Santa Claus. Now, Saint Nicholas was a monk. A monk is somebody who is very religious. A monk is somebody who is very religious. A monk is somebody who belongs to the Catholic religion. A monk is part of the Catholic religion. Monks are people who are so dedicated to their religion, who love their religion so much that they decide to dedicate their entire lives to God. To God. They decide to live their lives to worship God. That is their main focus. That is the main thing they do with their lives, is worship God. Now, monks live in places called monasteries. And in a monastery, you're only going to find monks. You are not going to find other people in a monastery. You are only going to find monks. And these monks spend their time praying, reading books like the Bible, and also sometimes leaving the monastery to go and help people out, to go and do good things for other people. Now, Saint Nicholas was one of these monks. And Saint Nicholas was a very famous monk. He was a very well-loved monk. And the reason why is because he was extremely kind. He was very kind and very friendly. Saint Nicholas was also very generous. He liked to give to other people. He liked to give things to other people. He liked to give gifts. It is even said, it is even believed that Saint Nicholas gave away all of his money. He gave away all of his money to the poor. He had a lot of money that his father had given to him. His father had given him a lot of money, and Saint Nicholas gave it all away. He gave it to the poor. Now, this made Saint Nicholas very popular and very well loved. This is where we start to see the idea of Santa Claus start to be created. Saint Nicholas was very generous. He liked to give to other people, kind of like how we see Santa Claus today. Santa Claus gives gifts to children. He gives to other people. So the idea of Santa being somebody who gives, who likes to give gifts, comes from Saint Nicholas. Now, before we move on, there is one interesting story that I wanted to tell about Saint Nicholas. Some people say that Saint Nicholas, although he was very kind and very generous, he was also somebody who could get really mad. He was somebody who could get really angry. Especially if somebody was saying something bad about his religion, about God. There is a story that says that at one point Saint Nicholas got into a fight with another man named Arius. Arius was saying that Jesus Christ was not God. He was saying Jesus Christ is not God. This made Saint Nicholas very mad because Arius was saying bad things about Saint Nicholas's religious beliefs. So Saint Nicholas punched Arius in the face. In Arius's face, he punched him. Now, nobody really knows if this story is true or if it's fictional, if it's not real. But I still think it's an interesting story about Saint Nicholas, and it's kind of funny to think of Santa Claus punching somebody in the face. Now, after Saint Nicholas had died, and many years later, we start to see the creation of Santa Claus, of the fictional character Santa Claus. We start to see the idea of Saint Nicholas becoming Santa Claus, becoming more like how we know him today. We see this mainly in a country called the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, Saint Nicholas, even after many years after Saint Nicholas had died, he was still very popular. People loved Saint Nicholas in the Netherlands. But they started to change the way they said his name. They started to say his name a little bit differently. Instead of calling him Saint Nicholas, they started to call him Sinterklaas, which was a shorter way of saying Saint Nicholas. Sinterklaas was a shorter way of saying his name. Now, the name Sinterklaas eventually became the name that we use today, Santa Claus. This all started in the Netherlands. The name Santa Claus started in the Netherlands. Now, eventually, the idea of Santa Claus, or as they called him in the Netherlands, Sinterklaas, the idea moved to the United States. It was brought to the United States by people from the Netherlands. People from the Netherlands who told stories about Sinterklaas or Santa Claus, took the idea, they moved to the United States and brought the idea with them. Now, most of these people from the Netherlands moved to the city of New York. And this is where we start to see the idea of Santa Claus become more popular and more similar to the idea we have of him today. This is where we see him become more like the Santa we know and love today. Now, in New York, people loved the idea of Santa Claus. And this is where Santa Claus started to look more like how we see him and know him today. In many books and in many poems that people were writing, they started to describe Santa Claus as being somebody who was very jolly, somebody who was fun and kind. They started to describe him as this very friendly character. The character of Santa continued to change, continued to look more like we know him today during a famous war fought in the United States. During the Civil War, which was a war fought between one part of the United States and another part of the United States, between all of the states in the North against all of the states in the South. These two sides fought with one another. During this war, Santa and the way people saw him, the way people viewed him, actually started to change a lot because of the war. An artist named Thomas Nast started to draw pictures of Santa Claus. He wanted to show and draw Santa Claus as somebody who supported the northern states. He wanted to show Santa as somebody who liked the northern states. He wanted to show Santa as somebody who did not like the southern states. So he was trying to show Santa as being somebody who was very involved, very interested in the Civil War. He wanted to show Santa as somebody who was fighting for the northern states. Now, in Thomas Nast's pictures, in his drawings of Santa, he showed Santa as being an older character with a big white beard. He started to show him and draw him with a big white beard. This is where the image of Santa with a big white beard comes from. This is where we first see Santa Claus with a big white beard. Although Thomas Nast's image of Santa, although his drawing of Santa started to look a little bit more like the Santa we know today, it was still a little bit different. His character was small. His Santa was very little, smaller than a normal person. We usually think of Santa as being a big person. We see him as being large and fat. But in Thomas Nast's picture, he was very small. He was a little person, smaller than a normal person. It wasn't until the 1900s when we started to see the image of the modern Santa, when we started to see Santa looking exactly like we see him and think of him today. It was actually the famous soda company, Coca-Cola, the famous soda company, that created the modern image of Santa Claus, the image that we think of today, the character that we know so well today. Coca-Cola started to use Santa Claus as an advertisement. They started to use the character as a way of trying to get people to buy Coca-Cola, to buy the soda, to buy their drink. Santa was shown as a character who loved Coca-Cola. So people would want to buy the drink. They would want to buy the drink. Now, in the advertisements, in the images that the Coca-Cola company made, Santa was shown as being big. Santa looked like a big person. He also looked like a fat person. He also looked very old with a big white beard. They also started to show Santa wearing clothing that was colored red, as well as colored white. They started to show Santa wearing clothing that was red and white. This is where we first start to see the idea of Santa wearing red and white clothing. So from the very beginning, from the original Santa, Saint Nicholas, the monk who lived a long time ago, to the modern Santa, the Santa we think of today being made by Coca-Cola, we see a long and interesting history about the creation of Santa Claus. Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you learned a little bit more about the history of Santa Claus, and I hope you were able to get some good English listening practice to improve your understanding of the language. Thank you so much for watching.